Dean Miller sat across from Dr. Olson, the fluorescent light harsh on his face. "It's terminal, Dean," the doctor stated, her voice flat, "and without a stem cell match, there's nothing more we can do." Sarah, his wife, lay pale in the hospital bed behind him, oblivious. He felt the cold shock, the walls closing in. "Fine family," Dr. Olson added, turning away, "or prepare yourselves." The sterile scent of disinfectant hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of where Dean Miller spent his days. Mercy Regional Hospital in Cedar Falls had become his second home. Sarah, his wife of 12 years, was fading. The doctors called it acute myeloid leukemia, aggressive and unyielding. Dr. Olson had delivered the news with clinical precision. A stem cell transplant was Sarah's only hope, and a family match offered the best chance. But Sarah had no family. She had always told him she was an only child, her parents gone early, leaving her truly alone in the world. He sat on a hard plastic chair in the waiting area, trying to sort through a pile of outdated magazines. Two nurses chatted by the station, their voices low but carried by the quiet hum of the hospital. One nurse pointed to a tablet. "Looks just like that Molly from Maple Creek," she murmured, a casual observation. The other hummed in agreement. "Yeah, same eyes, Molly Hayes, isn't it?" The name snagged in Dean's mind, an errant hook. Hayes. It wasn't Sarah's maiden name nor her married name. The sound of it, the faint familiarity of Maple Creek, felt like a loose thread in the tightly woven fabric of his life. Dean built custom furniture. He understood grain, joinery, the precise fit of one piece into another. His life with Sarah had been like that, meticulously crafted, or so he thought. 12 years ago, he'd met her at a county fair in Cedar Falls. She was quiet, with a gentle smile and eyes that held a hint of sadness he'd always wanted to soothe. She told him about growing up in small towns, losing her parents young, forging her own path. She had no siblings, she'd insisted, no close relatives left, just her, and now just him, standing vigil. The words Molly Hayes from Maple Creek echoed. He rose, walking stiffly toward the nurse's station, his voice rougher than he intended. "Excuse me," he said, drawing their attention. "You mentioned a Molly Hayes from Maple Creek?" His desperation was clear, a stark thing in the quiet corridor. The older nurse raised an eyebrow, a silent question about his intrusion. "My wife," Dean explained, gesturing vaguely toward Sarah's room. "She needs a stem cell transplant. We're looking for any biological relatives. Any leads at all?" The younger nurse, with kind eyes, stepped closer. "She just looked a lot like a patient we had a while back," she whispered, glancing at her colleague. "Molly Hayes, Maple Creek, Iowa. Maybe try looking her up online. Social media, something like that." She gave him a small, sympathetic smile, a silent encouragement to chase the thin lead. Dean nodded, a flicker of something he dared not call hope igniting within him. Back in Sarah's room, Dr. Olson stood by the window, hands clasped behind her back. She turned as Dean entered. "Any luck, Dean?" she asked, her voice calm. "With relatives? We need to widen the search." He shook his head, looking at Sarah's still face. The doctor's words were a cold, insistent drumbeat, reminding him of the ticking clock. He couldn't go home, not with Sarah in that bed. He walked out to his truck, the late October air biting and damp. The parking lot lights cast long shadows. He pulled out his laptop, the screen a pale rectangle of light in the darkness. Molly Hayes, Maple Creek, Iowa. The search bar offered immediate suggestions. He clicked on Facebook. A profile loaded. A woman with dark hair, a familiar curve to her jawline, and eyes that were undeniably Sarah's stared back at him. The resemblance was uncanny, almost painful. It was a younger Sarah, perhaps, or a sister he never knew. His stomach twisted. Molly's public photos showed her in a grease-stained uniform, smiling beside a lifted car. Her workplace was tagged, Grimes Auto Service. Dean clicked further, digging deeper into public records. He found an old obituary for Frank and Clara Hayes, buried in a local newspaper archive. The obituary listed their surviving children, Sophia and Molly. Sophia. The name hit him like a physical blow. Sarah's real name. The breath left his lungs in a sudden rush. Sarah, his wife Sophia, had a sister. She had a past she'd meticulously buried, a lie she'd carried for 12 years, a secret that now held the key to her life. He sat there, numb, the laptop screen reflecting his stunned face. The cold realism of the betrayal settled over him, heavy and absolute. He called his assistant, Mark, his voice flat. "I won't be in for a while, Mark. Handle things." Well, he didn't offer details. There were no words for this, not yet. He just needed to be away, to process the tectonic shift beneath his feet. Hours later, the hospital was quieter, nurses moving like ghosts. He found Sarah briefly awake, her eyes fluttering open, clouded with pain and medication. "Dean," she whispered, her voice frail, barely audible. "I need you to do something for me. Let me go." Her eyes pleaded with him. "I haven't," Dean whispered back, his own voice tight with a fresh wave of grief and betrayal. "And I'm not going to." The fluorescent light in Sarah's hospital room felt colder than before. Dean stood by the bed, the hum of her monitor the only sound. The truth, raw and burning, pulsed beneath his skin. He looked at her, so frail, the IV line snaking into her arm. The woman he had loved for 12 years, who had built a life with him, was also Sophia, a stranger who had kept a monumental secret. He leaned closer, his voice low, steady, a forced calm. "On my way to find your sister." The words hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. He watched for a reaction, for any tremor, any flicker in her closed eyelids. Sarah's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then sharpening to meet his. A faint gasp escaped her lips, a sound thin as paper. "How did you know?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, a thread easily broken. He couldn't hold back the sting of betrayal any longer. "Why didn't you tell me, Sophie?" He used the name he had found in the obituary, letting it underscore the distance between them. "All these years, why did you lie?" The questions were not loud, but they carried the full weight of his years with her, the trust he had poured into their marriage. A single tear tracked a path down Sarah's temple, disappearing into her pillow. Her chest hitched with a small, dry sob. "I was ashamed," she managed, each word a visible effort. "Ashamed of what I did to her." He waited, silent, the hospital room still, expecting more. She swallowed, her throat working. "After Mom and Dad's accident," she began, her gaze fixed on the ceiling, as if watching a painful memory play out there. "It was all so fast. The lawyers, the insurance, the money." Her voice faded, then gathered strength, a desperate need to unburden herself. "I took it all. The inheritance. I told her I couldn't handle it, the grief, the paperwork, that I needed to get away, to start fresh." She paused, her breath catching. "I told her I'd send her share later when I was better. But I never did." Her eyes, clouded with regret, finally found his. "I stole from her. I abandoned her." The confession was a ragged sound, raw with shame, coming from the depths of her fragile body. He saw it all then, the young woman, overwhelmed by grief and a sudden windfall, making a terrible choice, burying it deeper and deeper with each passing year. The elaborate structure of her lie, the carefully constructed facade of an orphan, an only child. Dean felt a cold nausea spread through him. The intricate web of lies she had woven, the foundation of their life together, now lay in tatters. He had loved this woman, shared his bed, his hopes, his future. And all the while she carried this secret, a sister she had wronged, an inheritance she had stolen. The betrayal was staggering, almost too much to process alongside the fear of losing her. "I'm dying, Dean," Sarah pleaded, her voice cracking, pulling him back from the precipice of his anger. "And I don't want to die with this secret between us, not like this." Her hand, thin and pale, reached out, trembling, for his. He took it, the skin cool beneath his fingers. "Please," she begged, her eyes pleading. "Find Molly. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her everything, even if it's too late for me." The last words were a faint whisper, heavy with resignation. The anger was still there, a knot in his gut, but beneath it, the desperate hope for Sarah's life, for any chance, surged. He could not give up. Not on her, not yet. His promise to find Molly was now interwoven with a promise for Sarah's survival. "I'll go," he said, his voice flat but firm, his hand tightening around hers. "I'll find her." He leaned down, pressing a kiss to her cool forehead. The scent of sterile sheets and fading life filled his nostrils. "I'll be back soon," he murmured, pulling away, "and I'm bringing help." The words felt heavy, weighted with the unspoken enormity of his task, of her confession, and the slim chance they were chasing. He walked out of the room, leaving the quiet hum of the monitors behind. The weight of her confession settled on him, a fresh burden added to his grief as he prepared to leave Cedar Falls, to unravel a lifetime of lies. The Iowa countryside unspooled outside Dean's truck window, a tapestry of green fields and budding trees under a pale spring sky. The beauty of it, the promise of new life, was lost on him. His mind was a frantic swirl of Sophia, Sarah, Molly, and the intricate, agonizing lie that held them all captive. The truck hummed, eating up the miles toward Maple Creek, a town he'd never heard of until yesterday, a place that now held the key to his wife's survival, or at least her peace. His phone buzzed, startling him. He glanced at the caller ID, Dr. Olson. His heart, already a tight knot in his chest, leaped with a dread he hadn't known was possible. He fumbled to answer, pressing it to his ear. "Dean?" Her voice was grave, clipped. "She's had a seizure. Her condition has deteriorated significantly." The words hit him, cold and sharp, pushing all other thoughts aside. "How long?" he managed, his voice a tremor he couldn't control. A pause on the other end, heavy with unspoken prognosis. "Days, Dean, not weeks." Dr. Olson's tone softened slightly, an attempt at apology in the face of medical finality. "I'm sorry." Dean's hands clenched on the steering wheel, knuckles white. He signaled, pulling the truck onto the shoulder of the highway, gravel crunching beneath the tires. He cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. He couldn't drive, his hands shaking too badly. The new timeline a brutal gut punch. Days, not weeks. The small window of hope he'd clung to had just shrunk to a sliver. He called Sarah's room. A nurse answered, then put the phone to Sarah's ear. Her voice, when it came, was barely audible, weak and raspy, a ghost of the woman he knew. "Dean, did you—" "I'm still on my way," he interrupted, his own voice hoarse with unshed tears. "I just heard from Dr. Olson." "Hold on, Sarah, just hold on." He didn't know what else to say, what comfort to offer when time was running out. As he sat there, the phone conversation replayed in his mind, Sarah's full confession. He heard her voice again, choked with shame, admitting she had emptied their parents' accounts. "I left Molly with nothing," she'd said, the words echoing in the confined space of his truck cab. "Not a penny. I spent it all. Built this life, this fake life." The intricate deception, the cold, calculated abandonment of her own sister for material gain. It was staggering. He grappled with the complexity of his feelings. There was the undeniable love for his dying wife, the shared history, the quiet moments of 12 years. But entwined with it was the bitter taste of betrayal, the stark realization that so much of what he thought he knew about her was a lie. How could he reconcile these two women? The fragile, dying Sarah who needed him, and the calculating Sophia who had stolen from her own flesh and blood. The moral tightrope he walked was thin, treacherous. Yet overriding all of it was a fierce, primal drive to save her. Not just her life, but her soul, to give her a chance at redemption. At peace, the urgency of Sarah's fading life propelled him forward, overriding his personal pain, the questions that clawed at him. The window was closing. He started the truck, the engine roaring to life, a desperate companion to his thoughts. He vowed to find Molly, to deliver Sarah's desperate apology, to make one last desperate attempt for a miracle. Even if the stem cell transplant was a long shot, Sarah deserved a chance to clear her conscience, to face the truth she had avoided for so long. He pushed the truck faster, the speedometer needle climbing. The fields blurred into indistinguishable green. The miles shrank, each one devoured by his urgency, time slipping away with every turn of the wheel. Maple Creek, Molly Hayes. The names were a mantra, a desperate prayer in the echoing silence of his truck. Grimes's auto service sat on the dusty edge of Maple Creek, a corrugated metal building that looked like it had weathered 100 Iowa winters. A scattering of old pickups and rusty sedans dotted the gravel lot. The afternoon sun beat down, making the air shimmer above the blacktop. Dean parked his truck, the engine ticking as it cooled. This was it, the place where the lie ended and the truth began. He stepped out, the smell of oil and gasoline thick in the air. A woman was hunched beneath the chassis of an old, faded Chevy Blazer, a wrench in her gloved hand. As he approached, she slid out, her movements practiced and fluid, exactly as in the photos. She was thinner than Sarah, her features sharper, more defined by hard work and sunlight. She pulled off a glove, wiping a streak of grease from her cheek with the back of her hand, her eyes, Sarah's eyes, meeting his. They held a weary intelligence, and now, a cautious suspicion. "I'm looking for Molly Hayes," Dean stated, his voice strained, raw from the long drive and the weight of his purpose. Molly's gaze narrowed, taking him in, a stranger in a nice truck, looking out of place in her world. "That's me," she said, her voice low, a touch of prairie grit in its timbre. Dean took a breath, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "My name is Dean Miller. I'm Sarah's husband. She's very sick. At Mercy Regional in Cedar Falls. Leukemia." The explanation tumbled out, urgent and clumsy. "She's critical." Molly's expression froze, the casual weariness instantly replaced by a stark, impenetrable mask. The name Sarah seemed to hang in the air, foreign and unwanted. Her jaw tightened. "Sarah?" she said, the name dripping with the bitter edge. Her real name was Sophia. The correction was a quiet accusation, a testament to years of festering hurt. Dean nodded, a mute acknowledgement of the truth. "Sophia," he repeated. "She needs a stem cell match. She needs family. You're her sister, Molly. You're her only chance." He laid it all out, the desperation in his voice palpable. He watched her face, hoping for a flicker of something, anything that resembled concern or even pity. But Molly's face tightened further, a muscle jumping in her jaw. Resentment, cold and hard, settled in her eyes. She turned, walking to a workbench, picking up another wrench. Her back to him, she spoke, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I don't have a sister." The words were an undeniable dismissal, a boundary drawn in the sand. Dean felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He had come so far, driven by such desperate hope, only to be met with this wall of ice. He pushed on, compelled by Sarah's fading breaths, her whispered plea. "She's dying, Molly. She confessed everything. She told me what she did. She's filled with remorse. Her dying wish is for your forgiveness." He laid bare Sarah's shame, her plea, hoping it would pierce through Molly's anger. Molly paused, her back still to him, then slowly turned. Her eyes were hard, unyielding. "She made her bed," she replied, the words clipped, final. "And now she gets to lie in it." Her anger was a palpable barrier, thick and heavy in the dusty air, a force that seemed to push him back. Dean's gaze drifted past her, into the small, cluttered office attached to the garage bay. Through the grimy window, he saw a framed photo on a desk. A younger Molly, smiling, standing next to an older man with kind eyes, his arm around her shoulder. And nestled between them, a young boy, perhaps 7 or 8, grinning widely. Her family, a family built without Sarah, without Sophia, a life carved out of the abandonment that Sarah had inflicted. He suddenly understood the depth of Molly's pain, the lingering open scars that 12 years of silence and stolen inheritance had left behind. This wasn't just anger, it was the profound wound of being left behind, of having to build everything from nothing while her sister lived a comfortable lie. Dean couldn't give up. Not yet. Not while Sarah was clinging to life, days dwindling. He drove back to Grimes Auto Service, the sun lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the gravel lot. Molly was still there, wiping down a workbench, her movements methodical and efficient. He pulled up, cut the engine, and walked toward her, the sound of his footsteps crunching on the gravel. She looked up, her expression a mixture of surprise and resignation. "You again," she said, her voice flat, tinged with the bitterness he had heard before. She leaned against the workbench, arms crossed, waiting. "I need you to understand," Dean began, his voice steady. "She's really dying, Molly, and she needs your help." He felt like a broken record, but the urgency was too profound to be anything else. Molly sighed, a weary sound. She picked up a rag, meticulously wiping a speck of grease from a wrench. "You think you know her, don't you? You're Sarah. Your perfect wife." She looked at him then, her eyes hard. Sophia was always good at manipulating. Our parents, God rest their souls, they thought she was so smart, so responsible. They put everything in her name, all their assets, the house, the savings, a little bit of life insurance, said it would be easier for tax purposes, less for Molly to worry about. Her voice was thick with sarcasm. And I was 18, just graduated, naive. She put the wrench down with a sharp clink. She didn't just leave me, she wiped me out. Molly's voice dropped, raw with the memory. The accident happened. Mom and Dad gone in a flash. Sophia disappeared within a week. Took every last penny. The house was sold, the accounts emptied. I woke up one morning, an orphan, with nothing but a few boxes of clothes and a note saying she needed to grieve alone, that she'd send my share when things settled. She never did. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of her 18-year-old self, left adrift and financially ruined. She vanished completely, Dean. Not a call, not a letter, not a single sign of life for over a decade, just gone, like I never existed. Dean tried to convey Sarah's genuine remorse, the tears, the confession of shame. She knows what she did, Molly. She's broken by it. She wants your forgiveness more than anything. Molly scoffed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. A deathbed plea isn't remorse, Dean. It's desperation. It's fear of meeting her maker with a debt on her soul. She shook her head. Don't pretend she's suddenly a good person because she's facing the end. She used people, Dean. She used me. She used our parents. The pain was raw, unfiltered in her voice, a fresh wound despite the passage of time. Just then, a small boy, perhaps 7 years old, ran out of the office, a bright orange ball clutched in his hand. "Mom, can we play catch?" he asked, his eyes wide. "In a minute, Wyatt," Molly said, her voice softening instantly, the harshness gone. "Dean, this is my son, Wyatt." A burly man with kind eyes and a grease-stained t-shirt emerged from the office behind Wyatt. "And this is Ray, my partner." Ray nodded, his gaze lingering on Dean with an almost protective suspicion. He was clearly family, built on a foundation of trust and presence, unlike Sophia's legacy. Molly then walked to the office, beckoning Dean to follow. From a dusty shelf, she retrieved a small, locked wooden box, worn smooth by time. She opened it with a tiny key on a chain around her neck. Inside, nestled among a few faded trinkets, was a photograph. 2 young girls, arms around each other, grinning into the camera. One was Sarah, undeniably. The other was Molly, her face softer, younger, before the bitterness had etched itself around her eyes. They looked inseparable, a picture of pure childhood connection. "This is all I have left," Molly said, her voice barely a whisper, a stark contrast to her earlier fury. "A few pictures, a broken doll. She took everything else. I had to work 3 jobs, sometimes 4, just to pay rent, to eat. Every step of my life was an uphill battle. No college, no safety net, just me figuring it out." The weight of her trauma, the unhealed wounds of profound abandonment, settled heavily in the small office. Dean saw it all then. The anger was a shield, protecting a heart that had been shattered and left to rebuild itself from nothing. This wasn't just about money. This was about a betrayal that had shaped Molly's entire existence. Dean knew then that he couldn't just ask for a favor. He had to ask for a miracle, for a forgiveness that might be too much to bear. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the Maple Creek sky in shades of bruised purple and orange when Dean returned to Grimes Auto Service for a 3rd time. He found Molly locking up, the garage dark behind her. Sarah's time was running out, a constant, urgent drumbeat in his head, overriding his weariness, his own confusion. He had to keep pushing. Molly saw him and a sigh escaped her lips, a sound of profound resignation. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, the chill of the evening air settling around them. "You're not giving up, are you?" she stated, not a question. "No," Dean replied, his voice firm. "I can't. Not while there's still a chance." Molly turned, walked into the office, and flipped on a single overhead light. She gestured to a worn cardboard box on a shelf. You want to know about Sophia? About her real nature? She pulled down the box, rummaging through it. These are old letters from her to mom and dad when she was away for summer camp, then college. She handed Dean a stack of faded, handwritten envelopes. He opened one, the paper thin and brittle. Sophia's looping script filled the page, describing her achievements, her academic prowess, her ambitious plans. But intertwined with the proud declarations, Dean recognized a chilling undercurrent. Requests for money, subtly phrased but insistent. Suggestions for how their parents should invest, how they should plan for the future. Always was Sophia positioned at the center of the financial decisions. It was a calculated, manipulative streak, a careful weaving of influence, even as a teenager. This was not the naive, overwhelmed girl Sarah had described. This was a different Sophia, a cold architect of her own advantage. Molly watched him read, her face grim. Mom and Dad were good people, loving, but they were simple, a bit naive when it came to money. And Sophia, she was their pride, their smart one. They thought she was looking out for their best interests, for our family's future. She shook her head slowly. She groomed them, Dean, for years. She then recounted the day of the car accident, her voice flat, devoid of emotion, like reading from a police report. The sheriff called just after noon. They were gone. And before the week was out, before their bodies were even cold, Sophia was already at the bank, changing ownership, emptying accounts, talking to the lawyers about selling the house, all in her name, like a machine. No grief, no tears, just efficiency. Molly's voice trembled slightly. She stripped me of everything, Dean. Everything. A sickening lurch went through Dean. This pattern of deception, of ruthless self-interest, predated their marriage by years. The woman he knew, the woman he loved, had built her life on a foundation of lies, not just to him, but to her own family, to her parents, to her sister. It was a truth he never knew, a deeper, colder betrayal than he could have imagined. Then came the devastating revelation. Molly walked to a corkboard, pulling off a faded flyer. It was for a rare blood disorder support group. My son, she said, her voice dropping, thick with a different kind of pain. Wyatt, he has it too. A plastic anemia, a rare form. Like Sarah, like Sophia. Dean stared at her, the words not quite registering. Wyatt? Molly nodded, her gaze fixed on the flyer, her hands twisting nervously. He might someday need a stem cell transplant himself. The doctors say I'm his closest potential match. The best chance if it comes to that. Her voice was a whisper, laced with a fear Dean recognized as primal. The news hit him with the force of a physical blow. It threw everything into agonizing relief, transforming Molly's ethical dilemma, her understandable refusal, into an impossible choice. He was asking her to potentially sacrifice her own child's future, her own child's life, for the woman who had stripped her bare. Molly's eyes, still bearing the hardened edge, now held a deep, unshakable anxiety. Every cough, every bruise, every little sickness, she said, her voice barely a breath. I worry. What if this is it? What if he needs me, and I've given it all away to her? Dean was caught in an unbearable crossfire. His dying wife, fragile and fading in a hospital bed. Her sister's deep-seated pain, the unhealed wounds of abandonment and betrayal. And now the life of a child, a small boy, innocent and vulnerable. The decision was no longer just Molly's. It was a choice that held the weight of 3 lives, twisted by a single, unforgivable lie. The last light of day had faded, leaving Maple Creek cloaked in shadow. Inside the small office at Grimes Auto Service, the single overhead bulb cast a harsh glow on Molly's face as she explained Wyatt's condition. A plastic anemia, she repeated, the words rolling off her tongue with a practiced, weary familiarity. It means his bone marrow isn't producing enough blood cells. It's rare. We monitor it, manage it, but it's always there, a ticking clock. The doctors say a transplant is the only real cure if it gets bad enough. Her voice was soft but imbued with a mother's fierce protection and a palpable fear for her son's future. And you're the closest match? Dean asked, the question feeling heavy, almost blasphemous. Molly nodded, her gaze fixed on the framed photo of Wyatt. The best chance if he needs it. And that's my biggest worry, Dean. If I go through with this for Sophia, what if it impacts my ability to help Wyatt later? What if I'm not eligible? Or what if the recovery time, the demands on my body, mean I can't be there for him when he needs me most? Her voice cracked on the last words, revealing the raw nerve of her deepest fear.